Today's episode is sponsored by Podmatch. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page. From to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard, Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who wouldn't like to get paid from home? With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. So if you are a host or guest and want to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, feel free to sign up today at joinpodmatch.com/lethalvenom and start expanding your network in seconds. Again, that is joinpodmatch.com/lethalvenom. Thank you so much to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode, and now on to my interview with Mr. Whiskey. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom podcast. This is the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I am joined by our guest, Mr. Whiskey. He is a U.S. Navy veteran, speaker, podcaster, and modern day preacher who's turning trauma into transformation. He is the host of The Couple of Nukes, where raw conversations about suicide, addiction, faith, and recovery help listeners rebuild their lives. From the military to ministry to mentoring Gen Z, he brings gritty wisdom, real life experience, and a of hope that doesn't hold back. He's going to be telling us a little bit about his backstory today. We're just going to have a little casual conversation with him, learn a little bit more about him. So, Mr. Whiskey, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Actually, sometimes people call me Lethal Venom because whiskey was quite dangerous to them. So, yeah, we've got Lethal Venom and Mr. Lethal Venom here today, Mr. Whiskey. But it's great to be here. I love connecting with new people and interacting. And I believe actually it was, I saw you were chatting with some people who have been on my show and vice versa. So I said, hey, we got to get together. And so here we are. And I am grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, I found him on, I think he was on Instagram. I saw that he was on someone's podcast on Instagram that he had been on my show. And I reached out to him and he was like, yeah, I've seen you on people's shows too and wanted to reach out. So we had the same brain thinking at the same, we had the same mindset going. But we're here now. If you could just introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a jack of all trades, as they say. I'm a podcaster, preacher, author, speaker, comedian. Most importantly, a dog dad. Just got back from walking my dog. Actually, I've been podcasting all day. Had 10 minutes to quickly sprint outside through the rain and walk my dog. And that's who I am when I'm not podcasting. I'm walking my dog, listening to my own podcast or other people's podcasts in preparation for stuff. But yeah, I was a electrician's mate nuclear operator in the United States Navy. I did that for a little bit. Not really by choice. When I was 17, my parents said, you're going in the military. And that's the shortest version of that story I can give. There's a lot of drama to that. I believe that it was for a reason for sure. I met a lot of people and a lot of things that changed my life and set me up onto this path of being a podcaster, a speaker, and being able to connect with people well, it's been a quiet season with all the vacations. It's summertime now. I'm sure you've dealt with that with rescheduling and scheduling, but typically, I record with people almost daily, if not a couple of different people a week at minimum, and it's great. And Mr. Man, I'm not sure if you would agree or not, but I would say being a podcaster is so amazing because you learn so much. I think every day you get not only host people, some of them millionaires, some of them homeless, people from across the globe who have lived such vastly different lives than our own, and then each other guests, but you get to ask the questions and guide the conversation to a degree and really learn about some interesting stuff that is helpful to you and others. And so I love being able to connect with people every day, people that some of them are one and done, they guest on the show, I never see them again, but others have become close friends that I talk to daily or weekly, and we collaborate on other projects. And it's just been amazing to have this podcast. The idea is that not every episode is for everyone, but my show is that anyone can come to the show and there is an episode for them. The idea is that you can come to the show and improve some part of your life. We've done topics from women's menopause to flying airplanes to being naked and afraid, like the TV show. I had EJ Snyder on my show. And then, like I said, homeless veterans who dealt with addiction. I've dealt with mothers with families who were drinking in closets and hiding their addiction. I've done suicide prevention, sleep hygiene and health, So the idea is that my show is just meant to be a resource center of guests and books and shows and conversations where people can come and improve their life. I'm very passionate about it. Even when I'm not actively podcasting, anywhere I am, I'm talking about the stuff that I talk about on the show. Luke Combs was once asked in an interview, what was growing up like? Where did you go to school? And if you could do anything, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? He said, I'd be playing my guitar in the bar. Even if I wasn't Luke Combs, however much money he makes and celebrity star, playing guitar, he goes, I'd still be doing this. This is my life and my passion, who I am. And I feel the same way about podcasting. You could take away the microphone and the camera and put me in a bar, a cafe, a ice cream shop, wherever it is. And I'm going to be talking about suicide prevention, addiction recovery, mental health, human connection, because to me, community building and human connection is so beautiful and so important. And so that's kind of the majority of my personality in life.
I 100% agree with you about the podcast, and I've had people on my show from all different kinds of backgrounds, and I've had numerous conversations on mine as well about different topics. It's it's nice having different kind of people on your show because you get more of a variety-based show than just one particular topic. As you said, I had someone come on here about women's health. I had someone come on here and talk to me about that. I've had voice actors come on and chat with me. I actually did one interview with a character actor today, and then I've had just I've talked about my things with mental health. I've talked about tea, about my classmates. I mean, I've done like silly episodes, and I've also had deep conversations with people. So I 100% agree with you about podcasting helps bring a lot of people together, and I've I've very much enjoyed doing it. What was life growing up? Because it says up here that your house was kind of a chaotic household. You had a lot of things go on. Can you tell me a little bit about what childhood was like for you?
Yeah, for sure. I need to be more specific in my bio. Everyone keeps asking, what does a household of chaos mean? But I think that's a great, segue for conversation. So chaos for me, it was defined as domestic violence, sexual abuse, emotional and verbal abuse, religious weaponization. So a whole lot of different mediums through which trauma and abuse happen. Now, I always start and say that I didn't have the worst childhood. There are people going through things worse. The grass is always greener. And, on the other hand of the fence, there's always a dirt patch, right? So we tend to compare and contrast a lot. And what I'll say is, from my personal experience, what I went through, it was not enjoyable. There were definitely great parts, right? There are definitely some memories here and there of a happy family all together doing something. But for the most part, what really sticks, what was a majority of my childhood, especially in my latter years, late end of middle school and high school, that was dealing with my father's addiction, which was worsening, alcoholism, and then later on drugs as well, with the religious weaponization, from tales of being told that I was the Antichrist and that, Satan wanted me from birth to just twisting the Bible into ways that are not accurate at all. To the domestic violence stems back to my father broke my mother's skull open and half of her face is made out of metal plates, right? So there's a lot of stuff that was going on both in the background and up front, and they all played different roles in my life. I'm at a point in my life now where I've moved on from all of it. Sometimes it comes out in certain relationships or friendships. You can kind of see some of the remnants and scars of that childhood trauma. But for the most part, it has been turned into, conversation pieces for advice, trauma recovery, addiction recovery, and having conversations on shows like this in my own show. And so that's one of my main messages is, that we are all going to go through horrible things in life, some things that really change a person. I've been through plenty of those, and some stuff still bothers me to this day. But what we can do is make the best of it, which is very difficult to do. Sometimes making the best of it, it feels like it's still nothing. But when we can at least take what we've been through to help other people, I think that's so important. And, even if it still holds us back in life or if it still affects us, as long as we can still help other people with it and move on from it and not spend our life in a victim party, a self-pity party, I think it's important to utilize what we've been through, and I think that is so important and it's helped me a lot in life. But that's what that chaos looked like, a lot of different forms of abuse. For me, the worst was the emotional and verbal abuse because like with the religious abuse, the way I kind of got over that is I read the Bible end to end myself. I've done so several times. I constantly every day am studying scripture, whether it's through podcasts or sermons or reading the Bible itself or through prayer. And so the religious weaponization, all that abuse, that kind of went away once I sought the truth and found the truth, right? But the verbal and emotional abuse, there's no changing that, changing what was said to me, changing how I was raised. That's a little different, compared to the religious weaponization. So I would say that affected me most, at least during school and when I was still living in that household, it affected me the most socially. There are still certain ways it affects me to this day socially, but not as impactfully as when I was growing up in that household and my parents had a lot more control over my life. But as I've talked about in other episodes, the idea of I could be successful if let's say my podcast was the number one show in the world and all these people said, Mr. Whiskey, you changed my life and we love you and we're proud of you. I still don't have that I'm proud of you, son, from my mom or dad. And it's different, that emotional abuse. My mother told me I would die alone, that I would never publish a good book, that no one would ever want to hear my story, that I would die full of regrets and lonely. So, and sure, living out a life that proves her wrong is great. But to have a mother that loved me and always saw that for me would be much better. But like I said, the what I can do is at least prove them wrong. So I would say that's kind of what that chaos looked like. And obviously it's in the past now, but it is a part of my life daily. Every day I have to accept that that happened and move on from it or use it in a way that is useful.
Has your relationship with your parents gotten better over time, or is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, so I don't talk to my mother at all. And you could deem that a work in progress because I do want to forgive her one day, but that's it's a big journey on its own. As far as my father, it's interesting because, someone the other day was really shocked by this information, but I talk to him every day on the phone. I've forgiven him for a lot of what he's done. People don't understand how or why. And I actually just wrote, I'm being featured in a book coming out soon about forgiveness. And the main topic I talked about how people, especially atheists who are friends with me, blame my faith, saying, well, you only forgave your father because of your faith. You didn't forgive him because you chose to. It was just because God told you to. And I disagree with that. Yes, the Bible does put forward, forgive one another. In fact, Jesus spoke a lot on forgiveness. But at the end of the day, it's still our choice to make. We have free will. And, a lot of people don't say, well, if I don't forgive this person, I'm going to hell, so I'm going to forgive them, right? A lot of people sin plenty and think they're going to heaven. So it was nothing to do with that. It was that I want a relationship with my father and I forgave him with holding him accountable, with setting boundaries, and with keeping myself safe. In the past, forgiving him meant enabling him and giving him everything he wanted and letting myself be hurt and the people around me be hurt. That changed to forgiving him, but setting boundaries and holding him accountable. And so that's really important. That's something I talk about a lot, something I wrote about in that book. And, it's so important. But at the same time, I shocked a friend the other day. They found out, Mr. Whiskey, your dad doesn't know that you podcast or that you speak at conferences, that you do comedy, that you write. And I said, no, because he wouldn't understand. And that's not a part of my life that I share with him. So do I have a relationship to the full extent of him? Not necessarily because of some of the parts of my life that are hidden, but I think at the same time, I have the relationship with him I need. We're father son. We talk once a day. He tells me about whatever craziness is happening at the Jersey Shore where he is, and I tell him what's going on here in Georgia, and I tell him about plenty of parts of my life without directly saying I'm a podcaster or a speaker. And it's sad to think that my father most likely will pass away, never knowing all that I did with my life. But at the same time, as long as I had that relationship with him and we loved each other, and I was proud of him and he was proud of me regardless of what I've done, I think that's what's important. So in a way, it's a work in progress because I definitely would like to share everything with him. But a lot of my episodes on addiction recovery and abuse are about him, and his effect on my childhood. But at the same time, I was asked once in an interview, are you worried about your family ever hearing these episodes or seeing them? And I said, no, the truth is the truth, you know, and if they have, and you know what, if they disagree, they're welcome to start their own podcast and talk about their side of things, right? My point is never to talk bad about my parents, to defame them or make their lives horrible. I just talk about what they did and how it affected me, and that's the truth. And it's not always that they had ill intentions. My mother was a victim of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, of verbal and emotional abuse, and she made certain choices because of those. But did those choices affect me and my siblings in certain ways? Yes. Did she have other choices she could have chosen, and did she choose certain things for certain reasons? Yes. So my relationship with my parents, it's gotten better and worse in multiple ways, I find my relationship with my mother is better without us talking, because when we were talking, it was very off and on, where she would put me in between my father and her and make me this middle messenger person that destroyed my relationship with both her and my father. So for me, it's better in silence. Some people would disagree. With my father, I'm able to love him at a distance that keeps me and him safe, but we still get a bond with each other. And some of that is due to the work I've done, some of the things that guests have said on my show, and some of the books I've read. But ultimately, it was my choice, to forgive, and it's my choice to not forgive my mother for the time being, and something I'm still working on.
That's such an impactful background. And I just wanted to mention on here that his mom has proven her opinion wrong. He's had since then 100 episodes from his podcast. He's on his seventh season. He's had numerous seasons. He's had 100 plus reviews for his show. As he mentioned, he speaks at conferences. From his website, FeedSpot actually selected his podcast as being the third best educational comedy podcast in 20 of this year. So to her, you've excelled.
I
You've
appreciate
done
that.
everything that most people probably would never achieve.
Yeah. And I want everyone listening to know that if a lot of us have been told things by our parents or by mentors or parental figures in our life that we weren't going to accomplish something, or sometimes it's from your partner, whoever you're dating or your best friend, you know, um, so people, and I had a social media reel about this the other day, like our parents and other people in our life, they can't tell you what your stuff is worth to other people, because I've had episodes that have been popular in other countries, and my mom could never guess what those people feel when they watch my stuff. Same with, the Lethal Venom, podcast. Like, who knows who this is going to reach? I can't tell you, and I have no right to say that no one wants to hear this because, they're, I can't speak on everyone's behalf. So I think it's so important. I think a lot of us, if not all of us, have encountered at least one person in our life who has put limiting beliefs on us, who has said, this, you should make this a hobby. This podcasting is never going to go anywhere, or, you should quit that job because, you're never going to get promoted, or you want to start that business, that's a stupid idea, or you want to write that book, no one's going to buy that. Do it for you. And if you, all that matters is that you believe in it. And when you believe in it, you're going to reach people who are also going to believe in it. So I think it's so important that you overcome those limiting beliefs placed on you by others. If you choose not to do something, that should be your choice, not because, well, my mom said it's no good or my dad said it's not going to be good. No one here on this entire planet is a prediction maker. No one is can see into the future. All they can do is project their own failures or insecurities or doubts onto you, you know? And so I think it's so important that at any age, Whether you don't ever let anyone tell you you're too old or too young either. I've had some guests on my show who are old as can be, and they're out there hiking mountains. I had a Vietnam veteran the other day, 72 years old, hiked the Appalachian Mountain Trail with an injured hip. I mean, that's inspiring to me. EJ Snyder, 6 times Naked and Afraid champion. When he came on my show, he was approaching 60, and he's out here throwing axes and hiking mountains in the desert, you know? And I've got myself. The first time I spoke at a conference, I was 22 years old, which was a couple months ago. So you're never too young or old to do something. Don't let people place these limitations on you. If you have something you want to do, go after it, pursue it, and work hard.
100% agree with everything you're saying. I didn't really expect my show to be as successful as it was. I started this as just a fun hobby. I I had friends that were skeptical at first about it. They were always like, which they were always saying it would be successful, but they kind of have been surprised at how quickly it's come. I started it really posting religiously about end of April, 1st of May, and already I'm like top five on charts. I mean, it's crazy, and I've gone worldwide too. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I had one review that I saw somewhere that was from Australia, and I thought never would have thought that someone from
Yeah.
Australia would have heard it. And I've had people from other countries listen to it too. I've had Japan listen to it, which I don't know how they're able to understand what I'm saying. This might be white
Yeah.
noise, but it's crazy how you never quite fully know what's going to take off and what's not. It's, but I don't want that to be a way of people not trying to go out and try it because you'll
Yeah.
regret not trying it. You know, if I had never attempted to do podcasting or anything, I would have regretted it because I didn't, because I'm happy that I chose to do this. It's fun. I interview people like Mr. Whiskey on here. He has, and other people that have such inspirational stories. And I, I know people get tired of hearing me talk. It's one of those things of I know people get tired of hearing me rant about, oh, I had a splitter in my finger. It's just like, all right, my hair's all messed up. They like to hear other people's stories as well. You mentioned earlier that you served in the military. Um, what do most civilians get wrong about mental health in the military, and what conversations are still off limits among veterans?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say, one of the things, it's funny, I was just editing a social media reel about this as we were hopping on here. And it's the fact that the civilian world's perception of the military is just completely like wrong. You know, so many civilians, because they've never been in the military, their perception of what it is based on movies, TV shows, social media clips, and if they know anyone in the military, just those stories they hear. And honestly, as a veteran, I can say the stories you hear are the highlights. You don't hear the day-to-day mundane usually. You hear some of the crazy stories. You'll hear the craziest parts of the military. But or what most people think of, which is the wrong perspective, is everyone thinks about the combat zones, combat active military members. Very important people. I always say that, but they're a small fraction of the military. I like I say, you have these people who are forward deployed in the combat zone. That's what everyone thinks about. What about all the men and women, at Pearl Harbor right now, at Newport News, at Corpus Christi, in all these bases, stateside? What are they doing every day, right? Because military mental health isn't just about the combat people, it's about everyone. And so that's why people are confused because they see so many veterans and active duty members taking their life or struggling with addiction. They're like, but you were never in a combat zone. It's not about that. That makes things way worse. Trust me, that makes things way worse. But a lot of the mental health issues stem from the military lifestyle itself, regardless of combat. It's the isolation, the leadership, the toxic work environments, being away from home, maybe not having your phone. It's all these things that add up. And some people like to make the counter argument, the chicken egg conversation of, well, do traumatized people go into the military and it's just an amplifier? Or do people go in and get traumatized? And the answer is it's both. It's both. You have a mix of people. It's one of the diversest groups of people ever is the military. My division, we had people from Africa, we had people from Mexico, we had people from the United States, we had people who were 36, we had people who were 17. All different people, very different people with different, all from different states too, you know? So I think the issue is that so many civilians don't understand the military members because they're seeing these movie clips of like these super intense combat deployed people, or even like the movies you see when you see the boot camp experience. That's not real boot camp. That's a dramatized Hollywood cinematic boot camp. It's different. Same with the day-to-day lifestyle. In fact, sometimes I watch military movies just to point out historical inaccuracies or like that guy's uniform is wrong. It's kind of funny actually. Be like, hey, now that I've been in the military, I pick up on this stuff because like prior to it, it was all just, if some guy looked like he was wearing military clothes, like, yes, sir. Now I actually know what's right and what's wrong. In fact, I had watched the Godzilla movie and I was looking at the military stuff and then also the nuclear operation stuff they were talking about in regard to Godzilla. I was like, oh shoot, some of that stuff is real. And then the rest of it I was like, that's wrong. So I think what you get is a skewed vision, right? And honestly, it's not something I think civilians could ever fully understand without going through it. Even veterans, from one to another don't always get each other. And that's just a human issue in general, but especially when you've lived this life that you usually don't want to talk about or that just is like so different. As far as off limit conversations for veterans, I would have to say, that's really a base to base kind of determination, a person to person. Every veteran, just like every person, some of them are open. I've met plenty of guys who served in the Middle East and they'll talk about killing people. And it's like nothing to them to have those conversations. I met other people who were deployed to a combat zone and it's like sealed lips. They won't say a word about it. They won't. I've met plenty of veterans who, they served in Vietnam or Korean War. They never spoke about it until right before they died. They said, I've got stuff to get off my chest before I pass away. So it really is so just person to person, but I don't think there's anything that I could name off the top of my head that is collectively just like veterans do not talk about that, because I think that we have a lot of difficult conversations or we have a lot of I feel like a lot of veterans understand like, hey, we're not going to talk about that. And we get it. Because some of the stuff we don't want to talk about, we understand. Like, even though I've never been, combat deployed, I understand they don't want to talk about that. The same way where even though they've never been a nuclear operator, if I don't want to talk about whatever it is, they'll be like, I understand. So, but I think that perception is so skewed. And so the civilians, they really equate PTSD and military mental health to combat only when it's so much more than that. I mean, most suicides are committed before or after deployment, and when you look at that before and after, and you look at the who's killing themselves, it's it's everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're a white, black, Hispanic, if you're a man, a woman, if you're high ranking and enlisted officer, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, doesn't matter. These suicide statistics are all over the place because it's not about any of those things. It's about the lifestyle.
Did the military make you have a different outlook on life, and did it change anything for you?
So I'll talk about so some of the good things I took away from it would be and I've always had a high work drive and discipline and work ethic, but I think the military furthers it in a sense that you have to do your job, right? And so, like when I went to the civilian working world, it seemed easier to me because I just got out of doing 12-hour rotating shift work, overnight watch, day watch, working on holidays and weekends for the same pay. You get to the civilian world, you've got overtime pay, holiday pay, night shift differential pay. You can call out sick. You can if you run late, you just call your boss, depending where you work, but most of the time, you just say, "Hey, I'm running late. There's some traffic." Okay, no big deal. You're a great guy. We love you. The military is a different story. Pretty much everything you do, your career's on the line. You can go to mast, captain's mast, which is kind of like court, pretty much for a lot of stuff or anything, pretty much, because there's a clause in there just like failure to do you perform duty. I mean, that covers pretty much anything you could ever do. So I will say because you go through those harsher working conditions, you come out the other side with a higher work ethic. And like, I love working with veterans compared to civilians, especially, young civilians who it's their first job or second job, they're in college or high school, whatever it is, because they can get it done. And if things get really bad, I mean, they're toughing it out right with you. I feel like veterans are the first to stay late or show up early, to take on the extra tasks because it's nothing to us. And that's not every veteran. Again, I mean, the military isn't like a guaranteed fix, right? A lot of people send their kids to military school to straighten them out or to the service to get their life together. Part of it is how much do you put your life together as well? Because here's the thing, the military will hold your hand and tell you yes sir, no sir, and this and that. When you get out and you're on your own, if you didn't embody those principles and they let go of your hand, can you perform on your own? The answer is no, then you didn't fix your life. Temporarily you had something controlling it and making it good. Now it's bad again. So the military is kind of what you make of it. As far as the bad experiences, kind of mentioned in the beginning of the episode how, just like the other traumas in my life, I have used them as a tool and means of conversation for my podcast, for helping others, for connecting with other veterans. So there's some permanent damage for sure with night terrors, with anxiety, with different mental health conditions. But for the most part, you know, the military is what you make of it. And luckily, I wasn't in long enough that it was a big part of my identity. And it's not always equivalent to time, though the longer you're in, the more it becomes your identity. But, I was a guy, I describe myself as a guy who was in the military, not a military guy. There's a different kind of personality. And I didn't make being in the military my identity. I don't make being a veteran my identity. Yeah, on podcast episodes, it gets brought up. I'm introduced as a veteran. But when I go to Ace Hardware or the grocery store, I don't say, "Hey, by the way, I'm a veteran," or "Hey, I mean, I've met some I met some guys who they're in civilian clothes and civilian world. They're retired. They come up to you, retired staff sergeant, whatever they say, they're like that's their personality. That's their all their they only speak in military terms and jokes and stuff like that. So I think because of the time I was in and because of what happened to me while I was in, I didn't make it my military. And for the first year out, it was. I only spoke in nuclear operator jokes. I was always doing military comms talk. I was doing military mental health big. Like it was a big thing, but it's not what I want to spend the rest of my life doing and being. Is there a time and place in the future where the military may be a big part of my life again? If it changes, or if I am one of the leaders of that change, for sure. But I wouldn't say it permanently changed me in any super harmful way or super positive way. It kind of is what you make of it, and I'm doing what I can to make the best of what I went through.
That's just awesome. I'm sadly cutting close to time, but
Yeah.
I highly want you back on my show because this is just getting kind of like the scratch. We haven't even
Oh yeah.
fully indulged in half of his story, so I definitely want you back on my show. So, but for this one, for people that want to learn more about your story and check you out, where all can they find you at?
I always put forward coupleonukes.com. That's my website, coupleonukes.com. And that's nukes, Nukes. I realize some people spell it Nucs. That was a surprise. But yeah, coupleonukes.com. That has all my social media handles. And then it has every episode of my show categorized so you can find what you need more efficiently. Suicide prevention, addiction recovery, physical health, fitness, mental health, life advice, comedy, unique stories, Vietnam veterans, Marines, each branch, first responders. I try to make it so that my website is a resource hub where people can go and improve their lives. So that's why I always put that forward. If you want to get in contact with me, there's a variety of ways on there to do so. And I highly suggest you do. If you want to be on my show, if you've got life advice, comedy, or something to share on my show, I'm always open to connecting with new people. If you want me to be on your show, you want to collaborate on nonprofits or other programs or whatever it may be, so how to reach me is on there. My shows are on there. Every guest I've ever had is on there, plus their information. So all their amazing resources from their podcast to their books to their programs, every show I've been on, including this episode, and then some of my other stuff that I highly recommend everyone checks out. But yeah, I appreciate you, Mr. May, and I definitely want to come back on because I know you did an episode on pet peeves, and I didn't get to share mine, and I'd love to do that sometime.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much for joining me, and hope we'll be in touch and hope to have you back on. Again, I wanted to say thank you so much to Mr. Whiskey for coming on to the podcast today and telling me your story. Again, I promise I will get you back on to where you can finish the rest of your story and that we can get this part two out as soon as we can. But to follow me on my social media accounts, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, or Instagram and TikTok. It is Lethal Venom Podcast. On Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. I just post a little bit of behind the scenes stuff about my podcast and teasers and trailers. So if you'd like to keep updates about new episodes, feel free to follow the podcast on those platforms. If you would like to follow the podcast on streaming services, it's available wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's technically everywhere wherever you get your podcast from. So if you would like to stay updated about when new episodes get released, so you'll be first to be able to listen to it first, feel free to subscribe to the podcast, whatever platform you're on. Again, thank y'all so much for tuning in, listening in. Y'all have a great rest of your day and week, and I will see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.